My name is Margaret Collins, and what I'm about to share is something I've carried in my heart for over 15 years. It's a story of loss, love, and a second chance I never expected. One cold December night, long after the streetlights had flickered on and the world had gone quiet, I heard a soft knock at my front door. At first, I thought it might be the wind, but something told me to check. When I opened the door, my heart nearly stopped. There, right on the porch, was a basket. Inside was a tiny baby boy, bundled in layers of soft blankets. His cheeks were red from the cold, but he was breathing. Lying beside him was a handwritten letter. My hands shook as I picked it up. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Ethan, my son, the boy I had raised on my own, the boy who left home years ago after a painful fight, disappearing into the world without a trace. The letter was short, but every word felt like a knife and a gift all at once. He explained that the baby was his son, my grandson, that the baby's mother, Lola, had died giving birth, that he wasn't ready to raise a child, and that he was leaving him in the only place he could trust, with me. I stood there frozen, tears already streaming down my cheeks, holding that tiny life in my arms. I didn't know what had happened to Ethan in the years since he left. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was the little boy staring up at me, needing love, needing safety. And I knew I would never let him go. The last time I saw Ethan, he was 17 and angry at the world, especially at me. He had always been a spirited child, full of questions and energy, but as he got older, that energy turned to restlessness. He didn't want rules. He didn't want structure. He wanted out. That final argument still echoes in my mind. It started over something as simple as the broken fence near the garden. I had asked him, again, to fix it. He rolled his eyes and said, "Why do you care so much about stupid things like fences when everything in this house feels broken?" I told him that taking care of the small things teaches us how to handle the big things. That responsibility builds character. But he wasn't hearing me. Not really. He was already pulling away. A few days later, he brought home a girl, Lola. She was bold, loud, and rebellious, the kind of girl that made you feel like she didn't belong in a quiet town like ours. She had messy hair, heavy eyeliner, and a don't-care attitude that rubbed me the wrong way. Ethan was mesmerized by her. They stayed in his room most of the time, laughing too loud, ignoring my house rules, pretending I didn't exist. When I tried to talk to Ethan about it, he snapped, "You never understand me. You never listen. Maybe I don't belong here at all." And then one morning they were just gone. His room was empty, the bed unmade, a few clothes missing. No note, no explanation, just silence. I waited every day for some kind of message, a call, a letter, anything. Weeks turned into months, months into years. There broke something inside me. As a mother, there's nothing more painful than not knowing where your child is or whether they're safe. But I told myself he'd come back one day. That maybe he just needed time. I never imagined that the next time I'd hear from him, it would be through a letter left beside a baby he felt too broken to raise. I still remember how my fingers trembled as I read Ethan's letter over and over again, standing there in the cold, with the baby in my arms. His words were raw, written in haste, but heavy with emotion. He wrote that Lola had died shortly after giving birth, that he had tried, for a few days, to care for the baby on his own, but grief had swallowed him whole. He didn't feel ready, didn't feel worthy. He was terrified of being a father. He said the baby his name was Noah deserved better, deserved a chance at a stable life, and I was the only person he believed could give him that. At the bottom of the letter, there was one final line that undid me completely. "I'm sorry, Mom. I know this is asking too much, but please don't let him grow up feeling abandoned." I looked down at Noah. He was sleeping, his tiny chest rising and falling so gently beneath the soft blue blanket. His face had the same delicate curve of Ethan's nose when he was a baby. His tiny fingers curled tightly around the edge of the fabric like he was holding on to life itself. And right then, something shifted in me. Yes, I was heartbroken. Yes, I was angry and overwhelmed. But above all, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. I brought Noah inside, warming him by the fireplace, feeding him the only way I knew how. That first night, I held him close against my chest and whispered over and over again, "You are not alone. You are not forgotten. I will raise you with everything I have left in me." It didn't matter how Noah came into my life. What mattered was that he was here and he was mine now. I may have lost my son to the world, but in return, life had brought me this small, fragile gift. a second chance. And I intended to protect it with all my heart. Raising Noah brought me back to life in ways I didn't expect. I was in my early 60s when he came into my world. Most people my age were preparing for quiet mornings, gardening, maybe traveling a bit. But suddenly, I was waking up in the middle of the night to feed a baby, changing diapers, learning how to swaddle all over again. It was exhausting, but it was also healing. Noah grew fast. By the time he was 2, he was running around the living room, chasing shadows and giggling so loud it shook the walls. Every time he laughed, it softened something in me. Every time he reached for me with those little arms, I felt like I hadn't failed as a mother after all. People in town would ask questions where his parents were, why I was raising him. I'd just smile and say, it's a long story. And it was, one that Noah didn't need to carry too early. I told him his parents had loved him very much, but they had passed away. That I was here because they had trusted me to keep him safe. He was a curious child, always asking questions about the sky, the wind, the stars. I tried to answer every one of them honestly except for the ones I couldn't bear to explain. At bedtime, we had a little ritual. I'd tuck him in, kiss his forehead, and whisper, "You were chosen, Noah. You were never abandoned. You were chosen." Sometimes he would ask what I meant. I'd just hold his hand and smile. He'd understand one day. I just hoped, when that day came, he'd still believe me. There were hard days, of course. Days I missed Ethan so much it hurt to breathe. I'd wonder if he ever thought of us, if he'd ever come back. But most days, Noah's presence filled the space Ethan had left behind. And in the quiet of our home, with drawings taped to the fridge and toy trucks scattered across the floor, I began to believe that maybe this was how healing worked. Not through forgetting, but by loving what remains deeply, fully, and without conditions. By the time Noah turned 15, he was taller than me and full of fire. He had that same spark in his eyes Ethan once had, the one that said, "I want to live on my own terms." And just like his father, he began to test boundaries. He wanted more freedom, more space. He wanted to go places with his friends I wasn't comfortable with, hang out late, be his own person. One hot July afternoon, we had a fight. He wanted to go to a weekend music festival 2 towns over, unsupervised, camping overnight. I said no. I told him it wasn't safe, that the world could be unforgiving, especially to young boys who thought they were invincible. "You don't trust me," he shouted. "It's not you I don't trust," I said, my voice sharp with fear. "It's everything else." He stormed off to the kitchen, and before I could follow him, I heard a loud thud. When I got there, he was on the floor, clutching his side, pale and shaking. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice thin and broken, "something's wrong." I dropped to my knees beside him, my heart pounding in my ears. He was sweating and cold, his eyes fluttering. I called 911 with trembling hands, praying over and over that it wasn't as bad as it looked. At the hospital, they ran tests quickly. A doctor with kind eyes pulled me aside. "He's experiencing acute kidney failure," he said gently. "It appears to be genetic. Does he have a family history of kidney disease?" And suddenly my breath caught in my throat. Lola. And Ethan's letter had mentioned that she had struggled with kidney issues, something I'd buried in the back of my mind all these years. I never thought it would catch up to Noah. I sat in that hospital hallway, staring at the floor, guilt washing over me. Had I failed him by keeping the truth hidden? Had I robbed him of the chance to prepare for something that could take his life? And more than anything, I felt helpless, because this time love alone wasn't enough to save him. I told the doctors to test me immediately. I didn't hesitate, not for a second. If I could give him one of my kidneys, I would do it without blinking. But the results came back within a day. I wasn't a match. My heart sank. I remember sitting in that sterile white room, the walls closing in, my hands folded in my lap, trying not to fall apart. I asked them to test extended family, friends, anyone who would agree. Our neighbors offered. Church friends signed up. People I barely knew stepped forward. But one by one, the answer was always no. Every time they said incompatible, it felt like a door closing. Noah was strong on the outside, but I could see the fear behind his jokes, his half-smiles, the way he avoided talking about the transplant. One night, he looked at me and said quietly, "I just don't want to die, Grandma." I held his hand tightly and whispered, "You won't. I don't know how yet, but we're going to find a way. I promise." I prayed more than I ever had in my life. I begged God for a miracle. I tried not to let Noah see me cry, but sometimes I couldn't help it, especially at night, when the house was quiet and every shadow reminded me of the time I might be losing. Then, one morning, a nurse walked into Noah's room with a look I hadn't seen in weeks. Hope. "We found a donor," she said. "A perfect match. Completely compatible." I couldn't speak. My hands flew to my mouth as tears spilled down my cheeks. I looked at Noah, who blinked in disbelief. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Yes," she nodded. "You're scheduled for surgery tomorrow." It felt like the sky had opened. Like after weeks of storm clouds, the sun had finally found us again. What we didn't know, what no one had told us, was who that anonymous donor really was. And that the truth was going to change everything. The surgery went smoothly. Noah came through it with strength I hadn't seen in him for months. When he woke up, the first thing he asked was, "Do I get to meet them? The person who saved me?" I told him we didn't know. That some donors chose to remain anonymous. I could see the disappointment on his face, but he didn't press. 2 days later, while I was helping him walk the hospital hallway, we passed a nurse's station. One of the younger nurses was chatting with a colleague. They didn't notice us at first. "I still can't believe he came all the way from Arizona just to do it," the nurse said, and insisted on no contact. "Most people would want some kind of thank you." Her friend replied, "Well, I guess when it's your son, that's enough." I stopped cold. My heart started thudding so hard I could barely hear anything else. Noah looked up at me, puzzled. "Grandma, what's wrong?" I quickly ushered him back to his room, saying I felt lightheaded. But the truth was, I felt like the earth had tilted beneath my feet. Could it be? Could Ethan have found out and come? That night, after Noah fell asleep, I went back to that nurse's station. I asked the nurse to repeat what she said, carefully, casually, pretending I had overheard part of it. She looked surprised, a little embarrassed. "Oh, just talking about a donor case. Pretty incredible." The man said it was for his biological son, but asked us not to tell the family. I thanked her, barely keeping it together. Because in that moment I knew deep down with absolute certainty Ethan had returned. Not to ask for forgiveness, not to take Noah away, but to give him life. Life. The days after the surgery were a whirlwind of relief and quiet reflection. Noah's strength returned faster than anyone expected, but there was a new question lingering in the air, one I knew I had to answer. One afternoon, as he rested in his hospital bed, I sat beside him and took a deep breath. The weight of the years, the secrets, and the pain pressed down on me. It was time. "Noah," I began gently, "there's something important I need to tell you. About your father, about your story." He looked at me with wide eyes, a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. "I want to know everything, Grandma." I told him about Ethan, about the boy who left this house broken and scared, the young man who had loved Lola and lost her too soon. I explained how he had left you in my care, believing it was the best chance you had at a good life. Tears welled up in Noah's eyes as he listened. He didn't interrupt, but I could see the questions swirling inside him, the hunger for truth and understanding. "Did he ever want to be part of my life?" Noah asked quietly. I squeezed his hand and nodded. "Yes, he did. In his own way, he's watched over you from afar. And recently, he made the hardest decision of his life. To help you, he gave you his kidney." The news washed over him like a wave, relief, gratitude, confusion, and hope all mixed together. I could see him wrestling with the complexity of loving someone he barely knew, forgiving a father who had once abandoned him. That day, a new chapter began, not just for Noah, but for all of us. A chapter built on honesty, healing, and the fragile hope that love can bridge even the widest gaps. Weeks passed since Noah's surgery, and the house felt different, lighter, yet full of unspoken anticipation. I knew Ethan had to come back eventually, and deep down, I hoped it would be soon. One quiet afternoon, while I was tending to the garden, I noticed a figure walking slowly up the driveway. My heart skipped a beat when I recognized him. It was Ethan. He looked older, worn by time and regret, but unmistakably my son. "Mom," he said softly, his voice cracking with emotion, "I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. I know I left you with so much pain. But I had to come back." I didn't say anything at first, I just stared at him, memories flooding in both the good and the bad. Then, with tears streaming down my face, I reached out and pulled him into a hug. It was the kind of hug that carried years of sorrow and longing. "Ethan," I whispered, "we have a lot to talk about. And Noah, he deserves to hear your voice." He nodded, understanding the weight of what I said. Later, when Noah came home from school, I gently prepared him for the moment. Your father is here. He wants to see you. Noah's eyes widened in surprise, a mix of hope and fear shining through. It wasn't going to be easy, but this was the moment when the past and present would meet. A door had finally opened for healing, forgiveness, and maybe a new beginning. The day Ethan and Noah met was one I'll never forget. They stood face to face, two strangers connected by blood and a lifetime of unanswered questions. Noah's eyes searched Ethan's, filled with a mixture of anger, confusion, and an undeniable longing. "Why did you leave me?" he asked quietly. Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him. "I was scared. Scared I wasn't good enough. I thought if I stayed I'd only hurt you more." Noah's expression softened just a little. "I always wanted to know you, to know why. And maybe to be a family?" Ethan reached out, hesitating for a moment before pulling Noah into a tentative hug. It was awkward, raw, and beautiful all at once, the first step toward healing the wounds time had carved. I watched from the porch, my heart full. Years of pain and distance were still there, but so was hope. We sat together that evening, sharing stories, laughter, and tears. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a beginning. For the first time in a long time, our family felt whole again, not because the past was erased, but because we chose to face it together. And that choice made all the difference. Life has a way of testing us, of breaking us down, and then sometimes giving us a chance to rise again. My story is proof that love can endure even the hardest trials, that family can be rebuilt from the pieces left behind. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and leave a comment to tell us what you think. Don't forget to subscribe to The Art of Revenge for more stories of resilience, redemption, and the power of forgiveness. Thank you for listening.